Talkshow. Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show. Yo, Grown Kid Talk Show. Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show.
This is quite easily my favorite and the best Final Fantasy movie to date. In terms of its cinematography, in terms of everything, I don't want to cut that short. In terms of its cinematography, in terms of its storytelling ability, one of the biggest gripes, again, for Final Fantasy 15 was the lack of story. I always have pushed that idea away because Final Fantasy X, for example, had a novella, an audio drama. I'm talking about the mixed multimedia storytelling. And Final Fantasy has been doing it for a while and only keeps getting better. Before I continue with KingsGlaive, this is not the only piece for Final Fantasy 15. They also had an anime that is free for you to watch on YouTube. I can't say this and stress this enough. Go watch it. If you felt like you didn't have enough story in your Final Fantasy that was so different than all the Final Fantasies that came out in terms of, well, everything, battle system, the way it tells the story, it's more like a play and a drama versus a linear video game story. I loved it. I'm not gonna go off that tangent. KingsGlaive provided that story that you felt you were missing, and not only did that, gave shine to characters that you didn't need to do in the game, because that would make the game 700 hours instead of something that is actually realistic to give fans and to give the player of the game. KingsGlaive just had the better story arc because it was way more, should I say, video game directed. Final Fantasy VII, while it does do the same thing, it plays off a video game, it was a sequel, and they were able to take liberty to the point where there was little room for error, in my opinion. Whereas you could mess up KingsGlaive more than it could help. Final Fantasy VII would clearly be the one that you would do, and you could make Barrett look, bring him into the new era of graphics, and that would be the big wow factor then. But at this point, when KingsGlaive comes out, we have seen this, right? We've seen the style, we've seen the CG, we've seen how amazing everything can look. So you're not going to surprise us with things we can't wait to see updated, and that's a really big issue. So what KingsGlaive was able to do then was able to tell a story that could add weight and true meaning to the game that you just played, versus being a sequel. Most people hate sequels. In my experiences, and I bet yours, people don't like sequels. So that already had that going against 7, even though it was still received probably better than KingsGlaive. I just think that 15 got so much hate that it was slightly overlooked and underrated as being the best Final Fantasy movie. I mean, look at that. Fighting actual Final Fantasy creatures. There was something more Final Fantasy about KingsGlaive than all the other Final Fantasies, because you could also make the argument that 7 was a cash grab. You could also make that. Whereas I think there was a genuine feeling from Tabata, and again, praise for Tabata, that what he was given from Nomura to work with, and the time he was actually given, because he wasn't on this project from day one, and he damn sure wasn't the one who thought of all of these ideas. It was Nomura. So Tabata had to really figure out how he wanted to tell the story his way with what someone else already molded. Again, what they had, it wasn't weak or bad, it was just totally unfinished. So what Tabata had to do was make the tough decision. We have been going this way to mixed and multimedia storytelling for a while. Remember, DLC has been very new to Sony in terms of them actually doing DLC, and we're going to talk about that Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC and my opinions on it. It might be a little different than what you've heard, but back to what I was saying. This transition was going to happen anyway. So he said Final Fantasy 15 is going to be that. We're going to release an anime. We're going to release a movie. We're going to release DLC. And we're going to release a novella. So everything that has been done previously with all the other Final Fantasies over all of the years has culminated into Final Fantasy 15, giving the fans the ultimate multimedia experience in addition to their video game. And I think that is beyond amazing that we've gotten this much content and this much from our video game. Why does that receive so much hate? I get it, story continuity, what's canon, what's not canon. I understand it creates problems, and I understand people's prior preconceptions come into play. But to think that this isn't the future that we want in gaming would be a real disservice. Now, if you feel like something was cut from a project, then resold to you, that's a whole different conversation of what I think The Last of Us 2 is doing. But again, I'm throwing shade. I'm gonna keep throwing shade till I play this game. Anyway, I just don't know how this can't be the penultimate example of mixed multimedia in gaming. Devil May Cry has done comics, has done an anime series. I'm sure maybe has done a movie, but is Devil May Cry on the scale of Final Fantasy as a franchise? No, clearly not. Maybe it's your personal favorite, but it's clearly not in terms of anything that you want to mention, sales or this or that. They're just not the same. And I just want to put emphasis on this and re-ask the questions and some new questions for you. Do you like when a video game tells more than one story in a different way? Would you rather a movie to a comic? Would you rather a comic? Would you rather a hard copy comic or a digital comic? Do you like to read novellas? I really love the idea of a novella, honestly, and I think the Final Fantasy X Will novella severely overlooked, over-criticized by people who did not read it. Even I had to read a translation. So that should tell you that criticism sometimes is not warranted or fair, but it will always reach the ears of people willing to listen to it. That was a gem. Someone, can we tape that? I wanted to bring this up because again, I found a God of War comic and I said, well, this is something I wasn't expecting, and I started thinking, and I came to Talkshow to talk. So thanks for listening today. What I want to recommend to you is the free download of God of War and the free YouTube anime. Well, it's not a YouTube anime, it's just the anime of Final Fantasy 15. I think you will really enjoy it, and if you've never done the mixed media thing for your video games, if you're a separatist, you believe that this art form is separate from this art form and this art form, then go check these out and then come back and tell me what you thought. Did you like it? Do you like the idea of it? Do you believe that we're just not at the point yet to where we can get full acceptance for these multimedia projects? Or do you think that this Final Fantasy, specifically 15, that was too much at one time? There was too much drama, and it takes away from these moments. That I think these moments I wanted to share a little bit more with the community, and I never got that feeling that it was accepted. Whereas Final Fantasy 7 had that immediate acceptance in terms of it being canon or not canon. Whereas, Final Fantasy X had the idea that the audio drama, the novella isn't canon, it's canon. Where we have those feelings. I just thought that 7 had an easier road, and therefore was able to get us more on shock factor, whereas 15 had to live on its own legs, KingsGlaive, and I think did it so well that some of us didn't want to admit that this was that good. because we wanted to already come in and knock Final Fantasy 15. It's funny when you go back and look at the reviews for Final Fantasy 15, you don't ever hear them say, oh yeah, there was an anime as well, and there's a movie. You know, it's hard. How do you critique something and evaluate something nowadays when stuff comes out after the fact? Do you have to revisit some of these games and give them new scores based on what has come out? Because people will do that for games like the weird Spaceship Galaxy one, where it was thousands of planets. No Man's Sky. People now are saying, oh my god, No Man's Sky is amazing. But when it came out reviewed, they hated it. But No Man's Sky has completely changed its outlook and look almost. There are still people who remember the shit that came out. But now they praise it for being something truly great. Whereas people are not yet going back to Final Fantasy 15 and saying that about what it did. There is a lot of hate still for Final Fantasy 15. I did a video, what do you want to see in Final Fantasy 16? And you can clearly tell the writers taking total shots at 15, never mentioning the fact that it had cheap DLC, tons of DLC, free DLC, a movie, and an anime. You know, just hearing an anime and a movie, it gets me excited. I don't know if it gets you excited, so let me know.
Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show.